Hello, hello! We're back with another section of Three Little Words, a memoir by Ashley Rhodes Carter. If you're new joining us, my name's Julie, and we're working on this one, so you can go back and catch up on the videos that are already posted to this point here. And if you're not new, thanks for coming back. Make sure you give me a thumb if you're liking it, and subscribe so that you catch the rest of the book and the rest of my summer reads that will be coming later this summer. But without further ado, let's get going on this one. We're in the middle of chapter 11, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, middle of chapter 11. We're on page 229 at the little page break. So let's jump right in. I did not know that Gay had been in touch with my mother until she handed me an envelope toward the end of March during my 7th grade year. I found out how to contact Leanne, Gay explained, and then I wrote to Lorraine. I was furious when I found out that Gay and my mother had been writing letters behind my back. I felt that Gay had horned her way into my most private relationship without my permission. What did you tell her? How well you're doing in school, that you have braces, that sort of thing. Did you say that you're a best-selling writer and makes films for television? Not exactly. I didn't want her to be intimidated. It was more general, like how many other children we have. I enclosed recent photos of you and offered to send regular updates. I promised that we would always love you and treat you as our own child. Gay swallowed hard. I said that we would allow you to contact her or any of your biological family when you asked to. So why didn't you tell me? I wasn't sure if she would even reply. I noticed that my mother had addressed the envelope to the parents of Ashley, in care of Neil Spector. Doesn't she know where we live? No. Phil didn't think that was wise. The envelope contained a card picturing a red-headed girl on the front. Inside, my mother wrote that she had remarried on Valentine's Day. She also mentioned that she played softball for a team called the Pride, which seemed like a meaningful coincidence because my little league team's name was also the Pride. She signed the letter, All My Love, Lorraine. I felt as if I had gulped down 5 Cokes in a row. I hurried to write back. My new parents are nice people, I began. I could not resist boasting about all the traveling I had done in my visit to the White House. I told her that I thought the coincidence of our team's names was bizarre. As a P.S., I wrote, I love you always, and I call my parents by their first names. No one can take your place. My mother's next letter included photos of her wedding. Aunt Leanne had been her maid of honor, and Uncle Sammy had given her away. She told me that she wanted to see me and that I would always be the most important person in her life. A series of letters, photos, and packages went back and forth through April. I started daydreaming about being with my mother again. I kept these feelings secret from the Quarters, and I did not dare tell Luke that I had 2 mothers, while he had none. Gay and Phil read all my mother's letters and checked the outgoing replies to make certain I did not reveal any private information, which I would not have done anyway. On one level, I had never stopped loving my mother. On another, I still just trusted her. Her first letters made me feel elated. Some subsequent ones made me squirm. She wrote that her husband, Art, desired a child, yet she did not want anything to alter the relationship we had begun to rebuild. I thrust that letter at Gay. I don't think she should have another baby. I'll be 14 years older than the kid. I huffed. What makes her think she won't screw it up the next time? My guess is that she's asking for your forgiveness, not your permission. Gay and I stared at each other without speaking. We were thinking the same thing. My mother was already pregnant. Gay handed the letter back. I crumpled it and tossed it toward the wastebasket, but I missed. I'm not sure I did the right thing by contacting your mother, Gay said. Are you going to forbid me from writing? No, Ash, we would never do that. But every time you get a letter, you go on a little high, then you crash, like too much sugar at a birthday party. She paced her office and stared out at the water. The dusk sky looked molten, as if it might explode in the west. Let's talk it over with your therapist. At my next therapy session, we showed the March and April letters to Dr. Susan Reeder. I watched as the therapist reread the closing of the most recent letter. I love you. I love you. Please find comfort in that. I miss you. Please write soon. All my love, Lorraine. P.S. How's Luke? Tell him hello, and I love him too. The doctor turned to me. How do you feel about this? I was quiet for a few seconds. How many times had I heard those 3 little words from my mother? In her way, she meant them, but they still felt hollow. Even so, they were precious to me. It's tough keeping the secret from Luke. Do the letters upset you? The therapist asked Gay. Yes. Every time a letter arrives, Ashley is off-kilter for a few days. Her mother has been writing for less than 2 months, and look what tension it has caused. Gay paused, and the office filled with the constant low drone of the air conditioner. Also, her mother wants to meet with her. Do you want to do that? Dr. Reeder asked me. Not now. I could not imagine my mother and Gay in the same space. How would you feel about limiting the letters? Gay jumped on this. Why not center them on holidays like birthdays, Easter, Christmas, even Mother's Day? There's probably something every month. Is that okay with you? The therapist asked me. Sure, I agreed, and Gay left the room. Before Gay sent my mother the letter outlining the new plan, she gave it to me to edit. Promise you'll tell me if something happens, I asked. Like what? With my mother, you never know. Just before Mother's Day, Gay asked me if I wanted to send my mother a card. Why? I never think of her that way. Well, I'm thinking of her, and I'm grateful that she had you, Gay said. In June, I went to stay with my godparents, the Winers, in South Carolina, and attended an arts camp where they taught. One night, I called home and said, I'm sick. What's wrong? Gay asked. Homesick, I admitted. I never felt this way before, maybe because I never had a home to be sick for. Gay laughed, but I was not joking. I missed my room, my bed, Phil's scrambled eggs, and even Gay's chicken nuggets. A few weeks after I started 8th grade, Gay was making notes in her date book when she looked up. Oh, today's Lorraine's birthday. I know, I replied. I had never forgotten the date. Even though she hasn't written you very much, I called her a few times. She always sounds grateful for the news, Gay said, but she keeps asking when she can talk to you. She studied my reaction. Are you ready to call her? I guess. I nibbled at the corner of a hangnail while Gay dialed and asked Lorraine if this was a good time. She handed me the phone and went to the far side of the room. My mother's voice was smoky, like a jazz singer's. Hey, she said. I imagined her in tight jeans and high-heeled sandals. How are you? Great. I made all-stars in softball this summer. I paced around Gay's office as I chattered on. I'm in the program for gifted students. I continued to describe some of our recent trips. Oh, and I got a lot of clothes in L.A. My, you've changed, she replied. You sound like a stuck-up valley girl. I leaned against the back of the couch to steady myself. Gay sensed something was wrong and walked over to me. I held the phone so she could hear, but it was my turn to speak and I had nothing more to say. Without another word to my mother, I handed the phone back to Gay and stomped out of the room. Gay hung up and followed me. What did she expect? I shrieked. I wasn't going to stay 7 forever. Gay just listened as I vented. What's wrong with trying to do well in school and sports? What's wrong with having a nice lifestyle? I can't believe that she sounded, I hunted for the right word, jealous of her own daughter. A few weeks later, my mother asked Gay what I wanted for my 14th birthday. Gay mentioned that I had treasured all the gifts she had ever given to me and that I still had the music box. When Gay told her that Mrs. Moss had kept my dolls and easy-bake oven, my mother said, I never liked that woman. Then my mother dropped the bombshell. She was expecting another baby, a girl, the day before my birthday. Gay broke the news as gently as she could. She knew she was pregnant when she wrote that bull about how her husband wanted a baby, didn't she? I exploded. Gay nodded. They should take this one away from her in the hospital. Autumn was born a few days earlier than I expected, and I was relieved that we would not have the same birthday. My mother sent me another easy-bake oven for my birthday, along with some other gifts. I was way too old for the toy, but baked one cake to show Gay how it worked. Using my allowance, I bought my mother and the baby some Christmas gifts. Late in January, my mother sent me a gift certificate and some pictures of the baby. My mother is going to ruin her life. I told Gay I did not want to keep the pictures. I looked over at Gay, who was grooming one of the cats. Her hair covered half her face, and the lamplight made her hair glow. She looked like she had been painted by Rembrandt. I blurted, Do you realize I lived with you almost as long as I ever lived with her? I groaned. Or anyone, I added. I haven't seen my mother in 6 years. Let me know when you want to. she replied. My reddening face revealed both my exhilaration and my embarrassment. Won't you feel weird? Gay sighed. When a man's beloved wife dies, he mourns her forever, even if he marries again for companionship. Your mother is a hard act to follow. She will always be the love of your life. I could not believe Gay was admitting that she knew she would always come second. There was a long silence between us. Look, Ashley, you need to make peace with what happened with your mother before you can feel secure with anyone else. I have read the records. Like most people, she has good and bad points. So why didn't you offer this before? My voice wavered. We've talked about it in a general way, but I hoped you wouldn't push it too soon because... Gay measured her words. She holds the power to hurt you, and I haven't figured out how to protect my daughter, well, our daughter, from any more pain. In June, I prepared to attend the arts camp in South Carolina for the second time. As I was packing to leave my adoptive parents and return once more to the state where I was born and where my relatives still lived, the curiosity about my mother that I had kept at bay for the past several months was renewed. I still didn't feel ready to see her, but I knew that I wanted something to happen. When Gay was helping me with the suitcase, I suggested as nonchalantly as possible, "Hey, why don't you visit my mother while I'm at camp? Use your guardian ad litem vibes and tell him what you think." I studied her expression to see if she approved, and give her some parenting tips while you're at it. I did not say anything else about it, although I was fairly certain Gay would do it. When the quarters arrived for my showcase performances, I showed them around the theater. During the lull, Gay said, "I visited your mother. Is she okay?" "She's doing well, Ash," Gay replied in a reassuring voice. "She's living with Art, who's a few years younger." "What kind of place is it?" "A simple apartment, not much furniture, but nice and clean." Gay laughed. When I arrived, Lorraine said, "Thought you would look..." There's an editing error there. "Thought you would look like either Princess Diana or Janis Joplin." "Definitely not Princess Di," I said. "What did you wear?" "My batik print skirt, so I guess I was close to Janis Joplin without the voice or the Mercedes-Benz." Gay chuckled again. I wasn't sure if I liked being compared to two dead female icons. She waited for me to ask the B question. When I didn't, she paused a moment and then took the plunge. Autumn is now 8 months old. I skipped over my half-sister and asked, "What did my mother want to know about me?" "What you looked like. I brought your recent albums, and she showed me one she had kept, including pictures from when you lived with your grandfather in South Carolina. We don't have most of those pictures, so Phil made copies." "Does Autumn look like me?" "Maybe your eyes, but there isn't much more of a resemblance. You do have many of your mother's facial expressions, though." "What did she say about me?" "We talked a lot about what you were like as a baby. She said you were very precocious, especially in toilet training and speech." "Does she want to see me?" I asked. "Very much so. She asked when she could." "And what did you tell her?" "That you were waiting to hear how our visit went." Gay's eyes darted, a signal that meant she was holding something back. "Tell me everything." I sucked in my breath. "Well, she became a little belligerent and asked me what I was going to tell you about getting together with her. I said that as far as I was concerned, you could see her whenever you wanted. Then she said that would be immediately." Gay sighed. I said that I wasn't sure about that. Then she became even more defiant and asked, "When is Ashley going to get over it?" "What? How can I just get over it?" I bristled as Gay continued. I said, "Ashley will never get over it. I explained to her that you were terribly hurt when she couldn't get her act together and that you had believed all of her promises." Gay took another long breath. "Your mother went on, I know all about her. My own mother abandoned me in a park, and I also grew up in an orphanage. So I told her that she should have known how much you wanted and needed her." I could hear the echo of my mother's whine when trying to explain herself to Mary Miller the last time I had seen her. She had not changed her tune after all these years. "Anyway, she moaned about how she tried to get you back, but they made it impossible. Just as I was tempted to ask her about the dirty drug test, Art interjected. He said, 'I understand what the kid is going through.' And then he told me about some difficulties in his own family. That stifled your mother's pity party. She ended by saying that she signed the papers because her attorney believed that would give you and Luke a better life. She claimed she did everything out of love. She really doesn't know what she did to me, does she? Her guilt makes her blind to your feelings. What feelings? I said sarcastically. I have no feelings. That night, I thought a lot about what Gay had told me. I remembered aching for my mother when I was in foster care, desperate to climb on her lap, smell her musky perfumes, have her stroke my hair and call me sunshine. I did not want to hear her jabber on about Autumn. Just thinking my half-sister's name made me grit my teeth. I was torn between resenting that she had taken my place and worrying that my mother might neglect her. I tried to imagine what it would be like to sit across from my mother and decided that is all I wanted. I needed her to see me, how great I had turned out without her help. I wanted her to know about how well I was doing in school and all my accomplishments. I was even secretly proud of my adoptive parents, who were far superior to her in education and status. Then I remembered her Valley Girl put down. Middle of page 239 with a page break. We heard little from my mother for 6 months, and just like the year before, she did not acknowledge my Christmas gifts until late in January. It seemed as though gaps in time were a tradition with her. I wondered if she routinely thought about me and my welfare, or if she just randomly remembered that she had other children and then had a little woe is me moment for herself. Her next letter to Gay said that she and Art separated. I guess I need a mom, she wrote. Would you like to adopt me? That felt really creepy to hear. I said, we'd be sisters. Then I wondered whether Autumn was safe alone with my mother. If my mother ever calls, I'm telling her I'm willing to meet her, I said. But the arrangements weren't made until my sophomore year in high school. By that time, I was almost 16. We met at a restaurant north of Tampa, which was about halfway between our homes. I had asked both Phil and Gay to come for support. My mother arrived with Autumn, who was almost 2, and a friend named Brenda. As I crossed the parking lot, my mother rushed over with outstretched arms. We hugged. I breathed in a familiar smokiness that mingled with a soapy sweetness. Phil delivered our sandwiches to a corner table. He smiled at Autumn when she looked in his direction. Other than that, he said nothing. Gay made small talk with my mother and Brenda. I kept glancing from my mother to Autumn. The 3 of us have the same almond-shaped eyes with coffee centers, I realized. My mother and I share muscular shoulders, and our lower center teeth cross at the same point. Her skin, and Autumn's, is more sallow. Mine is bisque white. We all have round cheeks, although Autumn's face is oblong, while my mother's and mine are heart-shaped. How was school this year? My mother asked me. I did okay, I said modestly to avoid another insult. Honor roll, Gay crowed. She's in all the highest classes. I finished high school before you were born, my mother retorted. Not a GED, a real diploma. I felt as if I were walking on broken glass. That's great. I glanced from my mother to Gay to Phil. My mother was trying to act polite and sophisticated. Gay was artificially cheerful. Phil's face was blotchy, a sure sign that he was upset. I wondered what the other diners would think if they knew why we were all meeting. Here we were, my adopted parents, my birth mother, my half-sister, and a stranger my mother needed for support, courteously sitting across from one another. Beneath my calm, my emotions were stewing. I felt resentful, abandoned, alone, sad, scared, and furious. Autumn reached for the potato chips on my plate. I handed her one, and then she started to climb on my lap. I lifted her into my arms and was surprised at how chunky she was. She pulled my loose hair and wound it around her sticky fingers. I realized that when I was her age, I had lived with my mother. A year later, they had taken me away. Almost as if she were reading my mind, my mother said, Everything's different now. I go to church, I have a good job, and I'm sober. I glanced at Phil. Disapproval wafted from him when my mother said, I tried to get you back. I could almost hear him thinking, yeah, right. I sipped my soda to quiet my churning stomach. What was I like as a baby? You spoke early, and my, what came out of your mouth. When Phil heard about the time my car seat fell out of the moving car, his face paled. He excused himself to go to the restroom. I felt sorrier for him than I did for my mother. She seemed like a former neighbor or babysitter who just happened to know about my childhood. Autumn wiggled down from my lap and reached toward my mother. Mama. Her flailing arm knocked over my mother's drink. Brenda mopped up the spill. Autumn said, "Ash me, carry me." I walked her around while my mother refilled her beverage. Autumn stroked my face with her gummy hands, and unexpectedly she poked her finger in my mouth, which was slightly open. I nibbled her finger playfully. Autumn started screaming. "Oh, I'm sorry," I said just as my mother reappeared. I handed over her crying child. Gay saw my distress and came over. "I didn't think I bit her that hard," I whispered to Gay. My mother kissed the boo-boo as if it were a big deal, even though there was no mark. Autumn gulped and sniffled in my mother's arms. "How about some pictures?" Gay asked. She handed Phil the camera. My mother and I posed with and without Autumn until Phil said it was time to go. When we left, Phil asked how I felt. I'm glad I did it, though I have no desire to see them again. By the second half of 8th grade, I had started spending more and more time with Brooke. She was a year older than me and had exotic looks that made her a guy magnet. Her parents would not let her date yet, so she would ask me to go to the movies with her and sit a few rows in front of her and her boyfriend, Seth. One time, she did not want to leave Seth after the movie was over, and they continued to make out in the back of the theater until the usher threw them out. When I dragged Brooke outside, Gay, who had been waiting for more than a half hour, was seething. "What took so long?" "The movie ran later than we thought," I replied. "No, it didn't. I went in and checked." "I thought you would be at the Kmart entrance." Admitting a mistake in foster care had just brought further punishment, so I never backed down. "Whatever," Gay snarled between gritted teeth. "No movies for a week." Brooke begged me to get Gay to change her mind. "I have to see Seth." A few days later, she asked, "Could you arrange an overnight at your house on Friday?" "Probably." She explained her plan. "My parents sleep upstairs and go to bed early. Your parents sleep upstairs and go to bed early. Mine are in the next room and stay up late." The idea was for us to wait until Phil and Gay went to sleep, sneak out onto the pool patio, leave through the screen door, get on our bikes, and ride to the intersection where Seth would be waiting in his car. "We can go down to the beach and hang out for a while." "I don't know. And she's bringing Rudy Mason," she said. "For you." I had never met Rudy, but I knew he was a senior and one of the stars of the basketball team. I was both excited and terrified. Gay and Phil agreed to the sleepover. I hurried through dinner and clearing the table. "Why don't I finish up the kitchen myself tonight while you watch the news?" I suggested in my sweetest voice. "Gay, shall I make you a cup of tea?" She seemed surprised. "That would be lovely," she said, and sat on the couch. Phil had a glass of white wine with dinner. There was enough in the bottle for one more. I carried the tea and the wine into the bathroom. I shook out the pills that Brooke had suggested I use to get them to fall asleep early. Oh, Jesus. I crushed them with the bottom of the pill bottle and then pounded them into finer particles with a scissors handle. Next, I stirred the powdery remains into the beverages. The grains dissolved easily in the hot tea, but they clouded the wine. The front door opened and closed. "Hi," Phil called. "I think she's in the kitchen." Assuming Brooke had arrived early, I cracked the bathroom door. "I'm in here," I called in a loud whisper. "What's up?" The voice was not Brooke's. Tabitha had stopped by to return a CD she had borrowed. She saw the tea and wine on the bathroom counter. "What's going on?" I closed the bathroom door behind us and told her as little as possible. "That's not cool at all," she said. "I'm out of here." "Bye," she said to my parents in the living room. I handed Gay the tea. Very casually, I said to Phil, "Thought you might like another glass of wine?" "Thanks, cutie pie." He said, "What's with Tabitha? I don't think she was here more than 30 seconds. "Oh, she's jealous that Brooke is coming over. Those two don't get along." "Three's a crowd," Gay added and turned back to the news. "I'm going to take a shower," I mumbled. Jesus. Just as I soaped up my hair, I heard banging on the bathroom door. Phil shouted, "Ashley, open this door at once." I pretended I did not hear him. Gay yelled, "What did you put in our drinks?" How had they known so quickly? Had Tabitha called them? Phil's pounding increased. "Either you open the damn door or I'll break it down." I stepped out of the shower and wrapped a towel around me. I turned the lock and jumped back in time to avoid the door slamming into me. Phil pinned me against the linen cabinet. "What did you put in our drinks?" "Nothing," I insisted. "Maybe the water was bad." "What about my glass of wine?" His neck flamed scarlet. Gay said, "We both tasted something bitter. I chased down Tabitha, and she admitted that you put," she choked, "pills in our drinks." "Did not!" I tried to wriggle away. Phil held my shoulders firmly while I clung to the towel to keep it from slipping. The shower was still running. Gay pushed past us and turned it off. "He's hurting me," I protested to Gay. Phil allowed me to squirm so the cabinet's handle did not press into my back. "What was in the drinks?" "Nothing," I insisted. "We have a lot of medicines in this house," Gay said in a raspy voice, "and chemicals and poisons. How long do we have? Do we need to call an ambulance?" "No." I felt as if my limbs were melting. Phil's grip kept me from falling. "Then we'll have to call the police," Gay continued in a slow, deep voice. I dropped my head. "It was just Advil." "How many?" "Only a few," I whispered. "Why?" Phil asked in panting breaths. "Just to make you tired sooner." Tears flowed as if a faucet had been twisted on a full blast. "Now I've ruined everything." Gay's mouth looked as if a gash had sliced her face. My heart was skipping beats, pounding inside my chest. Even though it was Phil who was restraining me, I was more terrified of what Gay would do to me. "What are you talking about?" Phil asked. He loosened his grip. I collapsed to my knees on the floor. "This is the end of my placement." "Placement?" Gay sputtered. "We have adopted you." Her anger seemed to expand as she moved closer to me. "You're our daughter, so cut the poor orphan me crap." We had never had anywhere to send our sons, so why should you be any different? But I was different, or at least I had felt different. I glanced up at Gay. She was fuming, but I was certain that she wasn't going to hurt me, or... I swallowed hard at the next thought. She wasn't going to ditch me either. Gay exhaled. "Now go get dressed, and then we will deal with your idiotic behavior." I was so ashamed I stayed in my room for the entire weekend. I lay in bed feeling feverish as I tried to rewind what I had done and find a way to make it so that it had never happened. Every time I got to the part where I mixed the crushed pills in their drinks, I would run to the toilet and vomit. Gay held cold washcloths to my forehead while I retched. I could not believe she was being so kind. Meanwhile, Phil had not come near my room. Sunday evening, Gay came to tuck me in. "Did you ever do anything horrid when you were my age?" I asked. "Oh, there were some stupid pranks," she admitted. "Once we had a slumber party and we were going to make plaster face masks. When we tried to remove one of my friend's masks, we started to yank her eyelashes out." "That's awful." "My mother had to clip her eyelashes with sewing scissors." I laughed. "It wasn't funny then." Gay's voice deepened. "That was an unintentional mistake. What you did was far worse. We'll need to talk to your therapist about it." "Okay." I managed to focus on her expression and saw compassion, not resentment. I would do whatever it would take to regain their trust. Gay flipped off the light. I turned my face upward for the inevitable kiss. Her lips brushed my tear-chapped cheek. "Love you, sweetie," she said. I clutched her arm. She froze. Then I kissed her back. "Love you too," I said. Oh, wow. It's the end of chapter 11. The things peer pressure does to us. My, oh my. And what amazing parents they are. All right. We're on chapter 12 now. Page 248. Now they will have to listen to me. Are you serious? Tess was filling me in on the latest gossip while I gave myself a pedicure. The television news was playing in the background. Suddenly, the anchor woman said, "Charles and Marjorie Moss." I looked up, saw their mugshots, and dropped my brush. It missed the bottle and landed on the carpet. "Gay!" I shouted. "Come see this!" Just then, the other phone line rang. Gay picked it up. "Really? That must be what Ashley just got excited about." She mouthed "Mary Miller" to me and jotted down some notes. When she hung up the phone, she braced herself on the counter. "Mary says that Mrs. Moss was arrested on 25 counts of felony child abuse and 9 counts of felony child neglect for abusing the children she and her husband were allowed to adopt after their foster home was closed. Mrs. Moss was also arrested for failure to prevent or report it." "See, I tried to tell everyone, but nobody would listen." I reached for a metal post that supported the ceiling and spun around, lifting my feet off the floor as I thought about the Mosses in their respective jail cells. They're gonna get it now. Exactly 11 years to the day that my mother was first arrested, the newspapers featured the Moss arrest. I studied the Mosses' mugshots. To me, they looked like Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head, but I knew how quickly they could morph into something else. A brownie-baking mom, a fascist guard, or a self-crowned foster parents of the year. Dress Mr. Potato Head up in plastic droopy eyes and thin pursed lips, and you could replicate Mr. Moss's blank stare in front of the television while his wife was torturing a child. I read the caption next to their photos in the Tampa Tribune and shouted, "I knew they would try to blame the kids." It says, the attorney for the couple accused of child abuse says the teenage children are making up the allegations. My long-suppressed, simmering ire erupted into a full boil. The story reported that the Mosses were accused of abusing their adopted children over the past 4 years, and that Mrs. Moss was accused of beating the children using her hands, feet, a wooden paddle, and a 2x4 board. Most of their children were in state custody again. They're probably glad to be out of that house of horrors, but now they're back in foster care, I sighed. And one of them is Mandy. Phil read from the article. It says here that their attorney said these people were the epitome of good foster parents, and that their reputation has been totally damaged. "What about my reputation?" I shouted. "They told everyone I had been lying." "It mentions that they were investigated 3 times before, but the charges were never substantiated," Gay said. "Weren't you questioned when you were there?" "Yes, several times." I turned to the St. Petersburg Times story. It concluded by saying that the Mosses were in the process of adopting a 9th child. I need to do something to help those kids. If I tell the police what happened, it will be cooperation. "You mean corroboration, cutie pie," Phil said with an uneasy chuckle. "And could you call the newspapers too?" I tossed in. Phil rubbed his chin. "And tell them what?" "That there are more of us out there who've got a lot to say about the Mosses." Gay agreed to call the newspapers. A reporter from the St. Petersburg Times, Wayne Washington, was interested in the information we offered. That afternoon, he drove out to the Mosses' trailer, and he spoke to both Mary Miller and Mrs. Merritt. The article that appeared the next morning called the Mosses' mobile home a living hell for children. It quoted Mrs. Merritt, "This isn't something that fell through the cracks because they didn't know." It also included Gay's comments about my cruel punishments. "She's still locked up," I crowed when I learned that Mrs. Moss remained in jail on $635,000 bail, with 34 charges of felony child abuse and neglect. But I was disappointed to learn that Mr. Moss was free on bond and that he had been charged with only 6 counts of felony child neglect. According to Mr. Washington's article, he did nothing, an arrest report said, and his wife maliciously punched the children, pulled them into a bathroom, and held them under hot water, deprived them of food, threatened them with a gun, denied medical care, and beat them with a wooden paddle. The article said they put one kid, I wonder if I knew him, in juvenile detention so nobody will believe him. I paused. But I've never been in any trouble, so they might listen to me. "I don't want you involved in a criminal case," Phil said. "I need to do this." "Why?" he asked. "For me, for Luke, for Mandy, for the other kids they hurt, and—" I took a deep breath. "To keep them from getting more children. I don't want this to blow over like the other investigations. They aren't fit to take care of gerbils, let alone children." Detective Shannon Keene, who was handling the Moss case, arranged for me to be interviewed by our local authorities. The next day, Deputy Tina Brooks met me at my parents' office after school. The deputy's daughter was in my class, and we had worked on a project together. "Do you have proof that Ashley lived with these people?" Deputy Brooks asked Gay. Gay handed her the list of my placements that she had found in my files, which showed the 8 months I had lived with the Mosses. I answered the deputy's questions, surprising myself with how fresh the memories still were, even though it had all happened 7 years earlier. A few days later, I had to go to the Citrus County Sheriff's Department, where they videotaped my statement. I thought I would be frightened to talk to these law enforcement authorities and looked for a place to concentrate my attention. However, the more I spoke, the easier it was. All I was doing was telling the truth, and nothing I said was going to get me into further trouble. We received transcripts of my session as well as those of some of the other children interviewed. Just in case Gay or Phil ever thought I had been exaggerating, I pointed out that the other children's comments were nauseatingly similar. For instance, I had testified I was sleeping on a top bunk, and I can recall a couple of occasions when I was taken by my hair and just thrown on the floor. One of the other victims had told the authorities that she had been pulled by her hair into the bathroom. Mrs. Moss used to punish Luke by dunking his head in the bathtub, and one of the adopted kids claimed Mrs. Moss held her head underwater for several minutes until she had trouble breathing. I gave a detailed description of the squatting punishments, and another child explained how Mrs. Moss forced her to squat for hours at a time. Hitting was a common punishment. I testified that Mrs. Moss beat me with the spaghetti spoon. One of the new victims revealed that Mrs. Moss beat her for putting a movie in the wrong case and struck her in the face for not sweeping the patio correctly. The Mosses kept another child home from school until her bruises disappeared. After the second article appeared in the St. Petersburg Times, Gay received a call from a woman who said that 2 of her children, Gordon and Heather, had lived in the Moss home the same time I was there. Gordon remembers Ashley, the woman said. They've told me all the same stories, and I complained to the department, yet nobody would listen. Gay told her that the reporter wanted to hear from other children who were in the Moss home, and she agreed to contact him. Wayne Washington called to talk to me about what I remembered. Will your parents allow me to interview you directly? He asked in a mellifluous tone. Gay got on the phone and set an appointment for him to visit our home. When he arrived, I showed him to Gay's office. Wow, Mr. Washington said when he took the sweeping views of the Crystal River. This is where the manatees come in the winter, right? I nodded. Not exactly like your foster home, is it? Mr. Washington was even more thorough than the deputies had been, and I gave him many details. After he left, I asked Gay, do you think he believed me? Of course he did. I grinned, then dashed off to do my homework. A few weeks after Wayne Washington interviewed me, he called Gay to verify some facts and told her that he had copied the Moss's foster care licensing file. I didn't know you could do that, I said to her. Apparently it's public record, and it substantiates what you described. He told me that we should look at it. Gay paused meaningfully. Before too long. She cleared her throat. He said it refers to a report that is critical of how they treated Luke, and there's a mention that the report should be destroyed. I gasped. Is the report there? No, Mr. Washington only found the reference to it. The licensing file also says that Mrs. Moss stated that she no longer allowed the children to taste her home-cooked hot sauce. Remember when we were in Cousin Neil's office and I wanted to sue the Mosses? Phil said it would be their word against mine. Now here's the proof. You have a right to be angry, Gay replied, but don't let it eat you up inside. Phil already gave me his Dalai Lama lecture. We have been through the whole forgiveness thing, and none of that changes the fact that they keep hurting children. I often went to the movies with my friends on Saturday nights, but nobody was available one weekend. Why don't you come with us? Gay suggested. We're going to see Erin Brockovich. I wrinkled my nose at the title. Gay played the guilt card. We haven't seen a movie as a family in a long time, and I'd like to take Grampy. He hasn't been out of the house in a while. I wanted to buy some shoes. You could shop first and meet us at the movie at 7, Gay added, putting on the pressure. Later that afternoon, she dropped me off at the mall. I saw some kids I knew in the food court and hung out with them. When I checked my watch, it was 6:30, and I still had not bought the shoes. By the time I got to the theater, it was 7:10. Phil was waiting out front, holding my ticket and scowling. Where were you? I held up my shoe bag. It took longer than I thought. You had more than 2 hours to buy shoes. Phil rarely got upset, and 10 minutes should not have been a big deal, but he had been embarrassed in front of Gay's father. Gay passed me the popcorn bucket and shot me a disappointed look. When the movie started, I focused on the story. Julia Roberts played Erin Brockovich, a woman who was running out of money after a car accident. When her attorney could not get her a settlement, she convinced him to hire her as an assistant. She stumbled on some medical records mixed in with his real estate files and discovered that a corporation was hiding contaminated water that was making people sick. Eventually, she helped file a class action lawsuit that won a lot of money for the victims. That was better than I expected, I announced when we exited the theater. Phil clicked the car door opener, but I was too charged up to sit down just yet. Why can't we have one of those class action suits for all of the kids who lived with the Mosses? I pumped the air with my fist in excitement. There must be dozens of them, plus Luke and me, as well as the adopted ones who are back in foster care. In the movie, they sued a huge corporation that could afford to pay millions. The Mosses live in a trailer. Phil said, "Where would the money come from?" He came around and opened the van door on my side, ushering me inside. "Has any kid ever sued the Department of Children and Families?" I asked as I reluctantly climbed in. Gay turned around from the front seat. "One of my former guardian kids was in a class action suit, but it was unsuccessful," she said somberly. "I want to talk to a lawyer and see what he thinks," I insisted. "Most of the time, nobody wins." Phil's voice sounded tired. "Anyway, you don't have time to worry about the future, kiddo." He turned on the ignition. "You'll always have us." That did not satisfy me. Who will Mandy and those other kids have? At my insistence, Gay called Karen Gievers, the attorney who had handled the class action suit involving one of Gay's guardian children. She told me that she's working with some other lawyers on a class action suit against the state of Florida on behalf of all the state's foster children. They're hoping to change some of the DCF's practices, but there would be no individual financial benefit for you, Gay explained. She wanted to know if you would like to participate. Of course! I could not believe it was actually happening. Will she include everyone who was in the Moss home? The problem is that someone would have to locate all those children. Next, someone would have to act on their behalf since they don't have parents. What about Luke? We know where he is. I've called Mary Miller to see whether she wants to represent Luke. I'll also call Heather and Gordon's parents. What about the Mosses? Can we sue them separately? I told the lawyer that Phil and I didn't want you to dredge it all up again, only to be called a liar. Gay's voice lifted a little. You know what Miss Gievers said? That you should have trusted me the first time. We've always believed you. We were just worried about proof. However, Miss Gievers said that I am a better mother than a lawyer. Once she studies the files, she will know if there is a case against the Mosses or not. The summer before my freshman year, a group of lawyers filed a class action lawsuit in the U.S. District Court in West Palm Beach on behalf of 31 Florida children, referring to most of the plaintiffs by their initials, although they used my whole name. A few weeks later, the attorneys decided that anyone who had been adopted or had returned to their biological parents should be excluded from the class. I was disappointed, but Luke was still in it. Miss Gievers suggested that we file individual lawsuits on my behalf soon because of statute of limitation laws. That's not what I had in mind, and it won't help Mandy or the others. No, Gay said, but if they hear about your case, they can still come forward and have their own. That same week, almost 6 weeks after the arrest of Charles and Marjorie Moss, Wayne Washington's most extensive article about their home appeared in the St. Petersburg Times. It began. It was half a lifetime ago, but that's not so long when you're only 14. Ashley Rhodes Corder says she remembers clearly her time in the foster home of Charles and Marjorie Moss. She remembers the day she learned what living in that home would be like. Nauseated, Ashley was hurrying to the bathroom when she threw up on the floor. Marjorie Moss didn't clean up the vomit. Instead, Ashley said she held her face in it. You know, like you would do with the dog you were training. There were 2 photos of me. One of Heather, the Moss's mugshots, and a view of their seedy trailer. The article said that the department had known about the hot sauce and the other inappropriate punishments 7 years earlier, but had merely offered the Mosses counseling and reminders of its policy against the use of corporal punishment. In addition, the department allowed the Mosses to adopt 8 of the children. Gay looked up from the newspaper. I wonder if we could get a hold of that licensing file or if it has gone missing. The reporter had interviewed one of my teachers who said I was a once-in-a-lifetime kind of student and a determined, focused girl. Phil beamed as he read aloud. Now, some of that determination and focus are aimed at the Mosses and the system that allowed them to take in children. In addition to serving as a plaintiff in the lawsuit against state officials, she gave a statement to police to support the case against the Mosses. Wayne Washington quoted me in the final paragraph. They used us to get money, she said of the Mosses. They used us to look like better people in the community. My whole goal is to make sure they never get children again. Is there any mention of the class action suit? I asked. Yes, Aaron, there is, Phil chuckled and pointed to quotes from Karen Gievers. Has anyone found Mandy yet? I asked. Gay shook her head. We're trying. All I know is that all of the Moss's adopted kids have the same guardian. So ask him. You know he can't tell us anything because of confidentiality. I hate that confidentiality crap, I snapped. It just protects the workers, not the kids. And the video's getting kind of long here, so I think we're going to stop there on the page break on page 259, and we will finish up chapter 12 for next time. All right. Oh gosh, it's getting so good. Hope you're enjoying it and hope you're doing well. See you next time. Bye.